YouTube, this is Jimmy Retro, and I'm here, just come back from the theater after watching the newest Pixar movie, Cars 3. The only thing that kept my spirits up after a disappointing presentation of E3 from all three companies. Why? For a few reasons. One, Nintendo had a complete lack of games and did not address the Switch shortage, which I have been trying to get for some time now, but it always keeps selling out. 2. Microsoft's Project Scorpio turns out to become just another updated version of the Xbox One, which is called the Xbox One X. And 3. Sony's lineup for now is just plain dismal. Nothing new aside from South Park. But I'm not here to talk about that. That'll be for another video. This time it's about talk about Cars 3. Now, the question that everyone had on their minds ever since that dark, disturbing teaser you saw in the opening where you saw McQueen crash is now answered. So, without further ado, will be spoilers, so keep it advised. And here's a question that was on everyone's minds.
Will Lightning McQueen retire?
So, if we were to start, well, this movie is a mix of Rocky 3 and some sort of Samurai Jack, I gotta admit, because, well, as you all know, Samurai Jack had its final season, and I recorded a reaction to it, which was an exception to my no reaction videos rule. So, basically, like Jack and Rocky, McQueen is on a quest to get his mojo back in time for the big race in Florida, which is seriously based off Daytona 500. Ironically, the first time where Cars was first mentioned. So, flashback 11 years to 2006. The first Cars movie came out. I kind of watched it in Spanish because I was in Mexico at the time, but man, was that movie astounding. Seeing McQueen do all those tricks made me just like, I really need to drive now. Flash forward 5 years later, we get Cars 2, which is not that bad as many people think, but it's seriously deviated from the priority genre, which is racing. So, flash forward 6 years later, and I stress 6. Why? Well, because the threequel got pushed aside one more year in order to make room for Finding Dory, which isn't a bad movie at first, but okay, I'm seriously getting sleepy, so sorry about that. But it could have been done better. And the same said with this movie. So, this movie starts out like it did 11 years ago, with McQueen doing his I am speed routine, only to be interrupted by Mater, saying McQueen needs complete privacy, and so Mater decides to tell everyone that he needs complete privacy, which is what, oh my goodness, I'm isolated. Which is something that was followed from the sequel, is that McQueen finally brings Mater to his races from now on. So, while McQueen meditates and he is ready, the race begins. The title was cleverly imposed on the Jumbotron, as was the first movie on the finish line. So McQueen was at the top of his game. He made some friends, he still kept his headlights, and he pulls pranks on them. However, one day, as McQueen and his two friends are racing side by side, an unknown newcomer appears. That newcomer is, who could it be? Jackson Storm. As he beats McQueen in a millisecond. And so, Jackson Storm represents a McQueen 11 years ago. Oh, oh my goodness. I'm so sleepy. All arrogant, all conceited, and self-centered. You know, like everyone all like he used to. But unlike McQueen, Storm has no respect for the old people. He just pretends it when the press takes photos of him and McQueen together. And so, from then on, Storm tries to train harder and to beat McQueen 3 more times, and then the fourth. And so McQueen starts training. Oh my goodness, I'm so sleepy. Sorry for that. So, it all comes down to the final race of the season, the Dinoco 500, which is in the LA Speedway, the same speedway where McQueen won his Piston Cup championship back in '06, and where he forfeited his trophy to help the King finish his last race, if anyone recalls correctly. So Jackson, Storm, and McQueen are starting to race, and there goes the crash comes in really early. I always thought it would take a little bit of time to progress instead of just smack right in front of you. So McQueen just starts racing, and Jackson Storm starts taunting him, saying, "Where all your friends go?" And as it passes by, they're almost close to the final lap of the race. So McQueen and Storm enter in for a pit stop together. So McQueen gets a really fast pit stop and takes the lead for a while. But then Storm comes in with the final straw, saying, "Hey champ, you doing alright? Don't listen, don't worry pal, you had a good run. Enjoy your retirement." Then he starts speeding off, and that's when Daryl Cartridge says he is fading fast. And as everyone saw with the leaked footage at the Detroit Auto Show, McQueen spins out, loses control, and the crash sounds more surround in the theater than it did in the movie. So we all know that McQueen would crash, but the trailer kind of gave it away. So in the end, McQueen crashed like this. The entire theater was completely silent when the crash happened. It was like, and then you just hear some gasps and some oh, and the fact that they crashed. I was actually surprised that the little kids in the theater did not cry, because there were reports in the teaser that kids were crying because McQueen crashed. But I think they must have kept good control of the situation and all that. But anyway, unlike unlike the King, who was helped to finishing his last race, for McQueen, no one helped him. They just hoped that today's race wasn't his last. So
3 weeks later, many months later. So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting and they had to hire a new one.
actually, only 4 months passed after his crash, and it was around Christmas time in Radiator Springs. And does it even snow? 'Cause that's all I want to know. So during those 4 months, McQueen was in his garage in a deep depression and decides to look at some old film reels of Doc Hudson. And then he sees his Wreckin' 54. which is confirmed to be at the beach instead of in an old dirt track in the middle of nowhere like it was in the first movie. And then McQueen starts flashing back on what Doc Hudson said when his racing sponsors quit on him and passed him over for the next rookie in line. So, and then McQueen, realizing that his fate might be the same as Doc's, decides to snap out of it after Sally gives him the encouragement to take that chance and use it for something. So, after a phone call with his sponsors, he gets Guido and Luigi along, and Mac takes him all the way across the country to the Rusty's Training Center, somewhere in California, or somewhere, I don't know. So, and there, he sees his own museum dedicated to him. Kind of similar to Woody's own museum in Toy Story 2. So he meets Sterling, which is the car who recently bought Rusty's from the previous two owners, and decides to let Lightning McQueen get back on a track to a future. So, unlike McQueen in the trailers, who was so reluctant to take on a technology, he was actually eager to try his hands on the simulator, which was a top model that Jackson Store would have wished to have, he said. So, he sees all of his cherished memories in the museum, from his first Piston Cup win to a small side note of Doc Hudson's mentorship to McQueen, and something that was carried from Cars to Doc Hudson's death. He was still voiced by Paul Newman via archives, which is something that Pixar has kept for 11 years or so? I don't know. But eventually, he meets with the trainer, Cruz Ramirez, which is a yellow sports Chevy Camaro look-alike. And she's Mexican, which is something that Pixar's trying to do to promote Coco. Not bad, but they could have done better than put two last names to one full name. So, basically, Sterling introduces himself to her. So, over the next several days, Ramirez starts training McQueen up for his race in a very unorthodox way, like doing Zumba look-alike dance routines, treadmills, drip pan hanging experiments, and taking a nap, and using your anger as motivation. However, McQueen was fed up with that and decides to try the simulator for himself. However, against Ramirez's warnings, he wasn't ready, and he ends up crashing a multi-million dollars worth of recent technology down the drain because he crashed into the screen. Literally. So, after that, he was sent to the office where Sterling decides not to race him and decides to make him move on to the next thing, merchandising. Which is pretty ironic because you see tons of Cars movie merchandise in a Disney store or at Disneyland, wherever. Pretty ironic. Trying to say that his racing days are over. But McQueen refuses that to push him aside, so he begs Sterling for one more chance to prove himself. And if he wins, he races as long as he wants, but if he loses, he'll retire immediately and start selling as much mud flaps as he can. Sterling agrees, so McQueen agrees to train at the condition of taking someone with him. That someone turns out to be Cruz. And so they go out to the beach to practice, and Cruz brings a treadmill, something that McQueen doesn't want to get, because he wants to race naturally, with the sand as his road, and the old pier as the finish line. So, they start what seems to be an insanely easy task, turns out to be a difficult one, because for one, Cruz is not adapted to racing. 2, she's not adapted well to terrain. 3, she gets swallowed by the beach. 4, the ocean touches her. 5, the crabs that she fears she might squish them. So, many hours later. And finally, the Queen did every prerequisite to satisfy her racing conditions, such as there's no sand, she already knows how to do it, and all the crabs are night. Funny joke. So they race again. This time she finally gets it. And so he races out to the pier, and when they finally do, she calculates his top speed to be 198, which is severely low from his top speeds in the first 2 movies, which were from 200 to 202, I think. And McQueen then starts to lash out because he had to squander an entire day having to adjust to Cruz's requirements, and thus made him slower. So, furious, McQueen decides to return to a racing center when he sees a sign saying Deep Thunderville or something. I forgot. But it was one of the old dirt tracks. And McQueen believes that dirt track racing may be just the thing he needs. But if the press find him, it is game over for him, as Guido refers to paparazzi. So, Mac decides to disguise all of them with something so they won't recognize his identity. Like for starters. So Mac decides to disguise himself as a party supplier. And they journey deep into redneck country. No offense to anyone. So McQueen is covered in mud, and Cruz has her decal covered with mud. So they decide to enter a race when they suddenly think it wasn't a race, it was a demolition derby. So they try to sneak out quietly, but they're busted and sent to the Crazy 8, which is a type of demolition derby in a figure 8 circuit. And they face off against an undefeated champion called Miss Fritter, which is a school bus that tries to kill them for their license plates. And so they start competing. Cruz is just panicked. She has stage fright. And just stays there motionless while McQueen is just trying to find his way out of the race. One by one, every car gets busted, hammered, jackknifed, you name it. Until only those 3 remain. And so McQueen is stuck dead center with Cruz just trying to find her way out of Miss Fritter's way. However, McQueen has a license plate buzzsaw stuck to his tire, which he tries to shake loose, but he couldn't until the last second, which is typical. Then Miss Fritter ends up getting stupefied by her own weapons. And so he pushes Cruz out of the way so that she won't be harmed. And he is trapped in mud with a water tanker that washes away the mud and reveals his identity to everyone. And so, as Cruz wins the Derby, McQueen ends up being exposed. Pretty ironic. So while Cruz is giddy of winning her first race, and McQueen just snaps and just says that she isn't a real racer. She doesn't know how to be a real racer. She's just a trainer. She doesn't know what racing is like. And McQueen tells her that this is his last chance, and if he loses, he'll never race again, much like his mentor did. Cruz gets incredibly hurt and decides to leave, but not before telling McQueen that she never wanted to be a trainer in the first place. She always wanted to be a racer ever since she watched him on TV, in cable television or antenna, I don't know. She scrapped up anything she could just to get a ticket to see him race. And how she tried to race for one time, but she knew she didn't fit in after hearing all of their engines rev. It's not indirectly implying a sexist type of behavior, but more like big and mighty versus short and puny. So, and then she asked him how did he feel like when he went on his first race. McQueen just answered, he just felt like he cannot do. He did not think that he couldn't do something. So Cruz left, and McQueen, downtrodden, decides to phone Mater for help and check to see what he could do. But he didn't know. He got nothing. Typical. But McQueen refuses to give up, saying that he is the one who decides what he has done. So, Mater inadvertently brings up the idea of the guy who taught Doc. So McQueen goes to Thomasville, but not before convincing Cruz to come with him with a really embarrassing Zumba dance routine and what my sister calls singing horribly. So, yeah, I had to live through that. So they went to Thomasville. McQueen then decides to look around and sees the Speedway, which he felt overjoyed to see, seeing as it was the Hudson Horn's hometown. So, then he decides to do a lap, such as turning right to go left, which Cruz masters in one lap, seeing to as there's no devilish schoolboys trying to kill her. But he is stopped by a truck who says that he was expecting him, saying that he is Smokey, and so he takes the two out to a bar in the middle of town where he meets other legendary racers from Doc's time. And they were actually talking about Doc's racing days, how he surpassed everyone in his class. And then they told stories about Doc, how he surpassed everyone, even a rookie who tried to slam him into the wall, but then, in an astounding turn, he flips and lands right on the finish line, which is really in contrast to the trailer that shows Doc presumably crashing by flipping. So, Lightning McQueen had said that Doc was never the same after the racing left him. But then Smokey decides to take it to his garage to see if it was true. And it wasn't. Because after Doc lost his career, he hightailed it to Radiator Springs for 52 years. And ever since the rookie came to town, he hasn't been any happier than he was spending time with McQueen than he was racing. Because Doc sensed something inside McQueen that even he himself hasn't sensed for a long time. So without further ado, he'll never be as fast as Storm, but he'll have to outsmart him. For starters, so he modifies Cruz to what Jackson Storm looked like, only yellow. So she ends up being Lightning's opponent in his racing strategy, which include drafting, finding windows to new opportunities, reflexes, and using him on the racetrack, which he tries so many times to no result. But then, one dark night, they decide to go for a run in the woods with no headlights. Something that hasn't been seen for a long time. So, they decided to run in the woods with McQueen constantly crashing between the trees until he starts to use his instinct to gain the advantage. And when he does, his paint starts scratching off. And more until when he jumps, his paint job just rips off. Which is probably going to get some perverse thoughts, especially for those who watch anime and see a female character do that in the middle of the night. But don't get too excited, because McQueen still has his old school rusty paint job from '06. Only modified and replaced with flaming bolt instead of a lightning bolt. So, they decided to try for one last race before going to Florida, which is across the country. And seeing Chick Hicks as a commentator in the talk show, who was also retired, and Natalie Certain, a strategical analyst, saying Storm's chances have risen to 96.8, with McQueen having a very low chance of winning, about 1.5. Chick Hicks starts to boast gleefully that his eternal rival is down in the dumps, and all the other racers saying that maybe he shouldn't show up. So, McQueen uses that to his advantage to gain the lead. However, Cruz takes the lead for the final stretch and wins the race. However, she forgets about how important it was to McQueen. So, depressed, he just left to Florida, as is everyone. And so the final stage is set. McQueen is in dead last because of him not making it to the qualifier. After a little thingamabobber with Storm about Cruz being his number one fan, which is not true, but, you know. So, McQueen ends up racing, using all of his strategies to his advantage, with Sterling as an advisor, but then Smokey rises up to take the mount as crew chief. So McQueen starts racing, but then Sterling starts to realize that Cruz was in there and orders her to go back to the training center, saying that she is never a racer, she is only a trainer, and she will always remain a trainer. So McQueen just starts to get a little bit distracted, and it is a little bit tad late to discover that a wreck is taking place in the track. So everyone starts to pit, and McQueen instead starts to call back Cruz and give her a total makeover for the race, saying that while he doesn't intend to retire, he is willing to do it if he gave Cruz that one shot to prove herself on a track, to the amazement of everyone. So, then she starts to race, beating out that pace car like McQueen did in the first movie, and then just starts using strategies that she herself created for other racers. And slowly but steadily, she's been making progress. And so, Natalie Certain just starts to reassess her chances and says that Cruz has won a trophy in a demolition derby somewhere, much to the praise and delight of Miss Fritter and her cronies. And so she starts racing. And so McQueen takes over as crew chief and orders her to pit after RPMs go over. And then he tells her to use the negativity to her advantage. And so Jackson Thornton decides to taunt her, saying she'll never be a racer. She can dress as one, but she can never be one. But then Cruz starts to feel dejected again. But McQueen only tells her to cheer up because that would never happen if she didn't invade his personal confidence. So then Cruz gets the guts and she goes back to racing. And she's right behind Storm, tailing him, copying him maneuver per maneuver. If only she would learn to drive backwards. And as soon as the final lap was said, they are neck and neck, with Jackson Storm just starting to ram Cruz into the wall, trying to wreck her like Chick Hicks did to the King. So, trying to taunt her, saying she'll never be a racer, but she retorts saying, yes, she was. And she does the amazing flip that Doc made 50 plus years ago, and makes it to win the race, and then just starts doing donuts and coughing in her smoke, which McQueen says she'll get used to it, along with the pranks. So McQueen was willing to give up his chance of continuing the race just so Cruz could have her shot. However, Sterling, after seeing her ability, tries to sign her up, but then she decides to sign up for Dynaco despite Cal Weathers right in earshot, along with a surprise cameo by the King. It was pretty nice, but I don't know if he spoke or not. But something happened on the Jumbotron. McQueen was put as a winner, saying that he started it, so why not put him as a winner? Seeing that loophole, McQueen uses it to his advantage to continue racing and not retiring soon. However, there was something he should do first. And so, back in Radiator Springs, he decides to take a role from his old mentor. It is revealed by then that Tex has bought Rusty's and merged those two together, which means that McQueen and Ramirez will both race side by side in the future. Which is pretty cool for those who are saying that McQueen will not retire. Which indeed confirms that he won't, but he decided to give himself a new look, exploring after his old mentor as the Hudson Hornet. But instead of that, he calls himself the Fabulous Lightning McQueen. If only he had done a red paint job with his number on it. Cruz was now given a number, Doc's number, 51, and is now under Dynaco. And so to celebrate, they decided to take one practice lap around the track. And the movie ends there. But, it's not the best threequel, because I was so hyped for this since Toy Story 3's announcement, but it did live up to some of its expectations, and cut out so much dialogue that should have been used, such as, "You can't turn back the clock, kid." but you can wind it up again. Which basically means you might have grown old, but you still got something inside of you. So, like the other two Cars movies, this one had some life lessons. Like for the first one, life's a journey, enjoy the trip. And the second one, like, don't underestimate your friends or something. The third one is about getting old and having to cope with it. Because we're all going to get old someday. And we might not understand the technology that at that time went on versus, but you could still learn from it and outsmart it some way. And even though we can't turn back time, we could wind ourselves back up and start anew, or make a surprise comeback of your own for something, because not a good philosopher, but I think that's what the movie was trying to say. So that's it for my video review. So please give this video a like, and if you've seen the movie, comment below on your opinions on Cars 3 and any subsequent video releases and what you'd prefer out of the movie. And don't forget to subscribe for more of me, Jimmy Retro, and my pals Elgoji98 and the Chango. So, till we meet again, we'll see you guys next time.